I'm so happy to be here. It's been a long process. We've been working on this for many years now. So it feels months, but in my mind for years. Yeah. But for this project, for months. So I will be taking you through some of the key findings that has come out of this huge pan-European research project that we've been doing, which is titled Keeping Up with Children as an Audience, because it's something we often see that children are way faster at moving towards new subjects and new themes than maybe adult filmmakers are. So trying to keep up with them also requires that you actually sit down and you have a conversation with them and you talk with them. So why did we do it? Well, we really wanted to support the film industry in creating quality content for the young audiences. That was one of them. But we also really wanted to give the youngest audience a chance to share their perception of films that are made for them. So what do they think when you talk to children today? What are their thoughts on films, series, entertainment, etc. across European borders? And what I brought today, it builds on insights coming from 12 different European countries. So thank you to Belgium, Estonia, France, Germany, Greece, Italy, Montenegro, the Netherlands, Norway, Poland, Portugal, and Wales. Thank you to the partners who have been helping find children in these individual countries, and also thank you to the experts and professionals from each country who have been providing really valuable local context as well. So 374 children aged 7 to 11 have all contributed and have shared their thoughts with us. Most of them come from qualitative interviews, meaning that they have shared video recordings of themselves or done one-to-one individual interviews. And then we've also done a supplementary quantitative research just to support to see if what we find holds true based on some numbers. But as I am an anthropologist, I'm not the biggest fan of numbers, only of this one, 374, because I think that is quite a unique and amazing number. It is, as far as we know, as also Elizabeth said, it's a first of its kind research. I don't believe that anyone has ever talked to 374 European children before about films and series. So we're pretty proud of what we're going to look into today. So we noticed 10 things, and of course there will be a full report and it will be published later in the year. But for today I brought 10 things that we've noticed moving across Europe, and hopefully the insights can inspire the conversations that we're also going to have for the next few days. The first one is that when you look at an age group that are in between 7 and 11 years, which is the target group that we've been exploring, maybe it's only 5 years, but they're actually worlds apart when you look at them. So we can see that a lot of things are happening in between the age 7 to 11, meaning that when the youngest part of this group, they still like to play pretend, they like to be children, they like to play and have fun. And the oldest in the group, they really start to think a lot about identity struggles. So it moves from how can I have fun with my friends to who am I as a person? And that all happens within this very small age group, you could say. That also reflects in how they look at films and series and what they're looking for.
Man kan også tenke på, når man ser karakteren, så kan man også tenke på seg selv. Fordi karakteren har liksom samme problemer som folk i verden. Det er ikke en superhelt.
So looking into the characters to see, okay, how can I mirror myself in this, and how can I reflect the problems that I have in my life into the films and series that I'm watching. We can also see that it really escalates quickly from being something that is perfect for me to something that is simply too childish. And the worst thing a film can be, if you ask these children, is childish. Because they don't really want to be children, or at least they really like to be perceived as a little bit bigger than what they are. I really love this quote from Montenegro.
Najgori film koji sam gledala je, pa sad baš u ovom trenutku ne znam. Čekaj, najgori film koji sam ikada gledala je, pa mlađa ja, kada sam imala 9 godina, kažem, taj film je bio savršen, ali ja sad kažem da je taj film bio jako dosadan. A to je bio film Frozen.
Yeah, so a lot happens in a few years. So Frozen can be amazing, but then when you get a little older, it's simply just too childish. Then we can also see that there is this movement going from a desire to simply just watch something. So me having time on a screen where I can watch whatever I want or whatever my parents put on, into a very strong preference, because we can really see that the older these children get, the better they are at highlighting, well, what is it that I actually like, or what is it that I'm looking for, like this Portuguese boy is explaining.
Tem que ter ação. Ação é tipo fazer missões, fazer coisas que estão no filme e tens que fazer. Pessoas.
Pessoas verdadeiras?
Sim.
Carne e osso? Ok.
Futuro.
No futuro?
Sim.
Em que sítio? No espaço? Ou numa cidade do futuro?
No espaço.
É? Gostas do espaço?
So really knowing what we're into is something that we see really comes with age. The second thing we have learned is that there are new definitions of what film and entertainment means for the young audiences. And that has something to do with where their media literacy begins, because it actually starts with shorter formats. So if you begin a conversation with children in this age group about what a film is, a lot of them will start to explain what is a video or what is a series, because they're based on episodic understandings. So when they talk about what a film is, it's something like this boy from Estonia saying, well, a film, it has many parts, it's very episodic and it's nice and exciting to watch. So it begins with the idea that first there was one episode and then there was another, and when there's enough, it becomes a film. Pretty simple as that. Then we can also see that a film is just a longer video. So a lot of it has to do with the definition of time here, meaning that that's often something that they would use first to describe. So a film, it's episodes, but it's also a long time.
Jeg vil forklare til min venn hva en film er, med å si at det er en times lang video, som inneholder noen ganger scener som er litt finnet opp.
So it's at least an hour, and it is also made up, which says something about where they also like to watch content on YouTube, where they don't often feel that things are made up in the same way as films. No? Yeah. And then I brought this boy from Italy who's explaining the worst film an adult ever made him watch, which was Hachiko, and here's why.
Beh, era un po' noioso perché durava tipo 2 ore, cioè, è bruttissimo.
Ok. Vabbè.
Like 2 hours about a dog? Whew, that's a long time. But there's definitely something about the definition of time here, and also their understanding of what time means for them in a everyday life that is also pretty occupied already. And that also means that when you talk to this age group, and this might be a little depressive in this room, but films are actually not seen as something that is that special, because it's just something like everything else that they watch on a screen. Meaning that you can watch a lot of things on a screen, and films is just one of them.
Hoe zou je een vriend uitleggen wat een film is? Ik zou uitleggen, bijvoorbeeld, je kan het op een schermpje kijken, bijvoorbeeld op een laptop, op een tv, op je telefoon. En dat is gewoon zo'n scherm, en dan kan je bijvoorbeeld, wat je maar wil, avontuurlijk films, drama, een beetje drama, sowieso denk ik uitleggen.
So all of them really starts to explain the film is something about the length, but it's also just something you watch on a screen. And then the screen can vary from the smallest screen, which is your smartphone, up until the cinema screen. The third insight we brought is that it can be stories about children, but not for them. And that has a lot to do with the fact that they're definitely not looking for childish stories. So they're really, really fast at positioning themselves as being a little bit older than what they are. We also know that they really like to look up to characters a bit older than themselves. So the worst thing something can be is actually giving them the impression that adults don't take them seriously, hence the childish belief. And AV content plays a really big role here, because it's something that you use to position yourself with. Either it's something you tell others that you're watching, or it's something that you tell yourself that you're big enough to watch. For instance, this is not from this research, but one of my favorite numbers, I'm a little number fan. 25% of the Danish 10 to 14-year-olds have watched Squid Games. 25%. It's not a show made for them, but it says something about where they're looking towards when they're searching for new content, and that had a lot to do with the fact that they encountered it on.
A jaki jest najgorszy film, który twoi rodzice, opiekunowie, nauczyciele zdecydowali, że musisz obejrzeć i dlaczego?
Czerwone kapturek, to jego nie znoszę.
A dlaczego?
também
So it can be for the babies, that's for sure. Then we also see this, that it can be about me, but it preferably about someone a little older than me. So again, it can actually be about children, just a bit older than myself, because I already know everything that's happening in my life, but if I can look up a little bit, I can also aspire towards new ways of being. Which is why this girl from the Netherlands, she says, well, why do I like the 8th one the most, the 8th Harry Potter? Well, it's about how Harry Potter is older, that he's already grown up. Well, not grown up, just finished school. And, well, not grown up is important because they don't want to watch films about adults either. So it has to have this youngish vibe, but preferably a little older than themselves. And then we can also see that there's something about them being extremely picky that also comes with age. We just heard the Portuguese boy speaking about all these different preferences he has. So that also means that they're very picky and they also want to be acknowledged in their decision-making processes. So they actually put a lot of reflection into what they're watching. It's not always just meaningless content streams that they engage in.
Hoe maak je meestal een keuze waar je naar gaat kijken?
Nou, meestal kies ik tussen de dingen waar ik al in ben begonnen. Maar soms kies ik gewoon ook een hele nieuwe film en dan kijk ik eerst een klein stukje ervan. En dan bepaal ik wat ik ervan vind. Als ik het dan heb bepaald, dan kies ik het.
So they would really like to be seen as very active consumers when it comes to films and series. Number 4 is that we can see that genre mixes are in high demand. That also means a little bit that they're not per se genre fans and they're not gravitating towards traditional genre films, but they are really happy with everything that mixes everything up. So,
Gerne?
Also, ich mag halt den witzig, aber auch ein bisschen brutal, aber auch witzig und die sind einfach richtig. Man will immer weiter gucken mit dem Film.
this is something we see a lot, that if it has a little bit of everything, it's actually easier to keep on watching because then you feel that you are being entertained in all possible ways. We can also see that this mix of emotion is easiest found in a mix of genres. So they really all come back to these different types of genre mixes or element mixes when they talk about stories that engage them. So this is a Portuguese boy explaining what would be a good film for him, and that's so I would like bats, monsters, ghosts, zombies, and then a group of friends solving mysteries and having a lot of adventures. I would like to see a movie that explored fear and also the courage to face it. So they do have this combination of talking about what is the emotion or the emotional outcome that I'm looking for, but how are we getting there? That has to be full of adventures and bats and monsters and etc. Of course, taking a lot of inspiration in from the bigger Marvel titles. We've seen those mentioned a lot as well in this research. So I don't think the bats are super coincidental here. Then we can see that when you talk to the young audiences, they really talk a lot about the characters before they talk about the actual plot in the story. When they talk about the characters, it is because they are themselves in a time of their life where they're going through really big developments. So it's really natural for them to search for inspiration for how can I develop as a person, how can I be inspired, what can I aspire to. And when they look at the characters, they also see what is this character good at, what are the special skills, what can I take away from this character. Again, Harry Potter is someone who's being mentioned a lot because he is in some ways just a pretty ordinary boy, but with some really extraordinary skills. And that is something that feels very impressive to the youngest audience, that they look at characters that are really good at doing something, or that have a lot of skills that they can be inspired from. Then we can also see that it has a lot to do with relatable characters over the long narratives. So when you talk to children and you ask them to explain to you their favorite film, their point of departure will always be in the character, not necessarily in what the story is about, but about that specific one character. Here's a Swiss girl explaining.
Was ich vergessen habe, ist meine aller Lieblingsgeschichte ist Star Butterfly, weil es ist halt so, dass es ist halt ein Mädchen, also eine Prinzessin, und sie kann kämpfen, sie hat Zauberkräfte, und ja, Zauberkräfte finde ich mega cool, und ich finde halt, ja, dass sie ist einfach so gute Kämpferin, besser als Buben im Film, oder vechten.
So not mention who is it that she's fighting against, but she can fight and she's better than the boys, and that is also important here. And then we can see that in general it's just about it's a very character-driven engagement that we find in the young audiences. So often characters are just the primary hook into the storytelling to these young people. Again, a girl from Belgium is explaining here.
Mijn voorbeeld zou zijn Chihiro. Dat is een Japanse film. En het gaat over een meisje die in een soort van sprookjeskasteel komt.
So we're not really sure, maybe it's a sort of fairy tale-ish, but we definitely know that it's a cool girl character, and that is super nice. Then we can see that when they talk about what drives their interest as well, they talk a lot about how they are able to mirror themselves emotionally into the stories that they are engaged in. But emotional mirroring somehow is easier when it takes place in elevated realities. Because if it takes place in a context that is too close to home, then it's a little hard to actually go all the way in and engage. And often we can also see that children, especially in the older age group, they have a tendency to look for errors in local native storytelling. They'll say, no, we don't talk like that, or we're not friends like that, or that doesn't feel authentic to me. But when it takes place in an elevated reality, it's actually easier for them to take in all these emotional storylines that are often embedded in storytelling for children. So we can see that what they're looking for is real emotions, but in elevated settings, meaning that the stories that somehow blend what feels real emotionally to me in something that's maybe a little not real or unreal, then it's easy. So for instance, this girl from Estonia is explaining about the Transformers.
Minu kõige lemmikumaks tegelaseks on Transformite filmist Bumblebee.
Miks?
Siis kuna nagu näiteks, mulle meeldib nagu siis kollasvärvi autod ja niimoodi, siis ta nagu muutub nagu autokotiks. Siis see on nagu hästi põnev ka.
Okei, aga kas tal on mingi iseloom ka, mis sulle meeldib?
Talle nagu meeldib nagu teisi nagu enda kaaslasi kaitsta ja siis ta on nagu hästi sõbralik.
So the emotional outcome, but maybe in the shape of a car, if that's possible, that would be really great. Then we can also see that it only takes one striking element to build identification. Meaning that maybe the time for social realism is not necessarily the best time right now, because they're actually really good at finding those striking elements in very different types of stories where they can identify or relate. For instance, like this girl from Portugal says, well, it's a red-haired girl just like me named Maria. Maybe Maria is actually a 40-year-old woman, but she has red hair, so that makes it as easy for me to engage with this character. We can see that it is this mix of the emotional depth, but also in a captivating setting that makes the audiences the most engaged in the storytelling. It also makes it the most exciting for them to keep along the story. And then this whole idea of mixing the ordinary but with an extraordinary splash is something that we see highlighted a lot by the young audiences. Like this girl from Estonia is explaining, well, there's something a little added on top, kind of elaborated, but otherwise just normal, ordinary people. So if we can take ordinary people that I can mirror myself in, but then you put them into maybe Hogwarts, okay, now you have my attention. Or if you know that there is an ordinary man behind Batman, okay, now I'm also really captivated by these narratives as well. Then we can see, looking into the film experience and how they perceive film, that the film experience does not necessarily start at the cinema, meaning that for a lot of these children, film is understood as something very social, something very family-based, and a very home-based experience. That, of course, has to do with the fact that they spend a lot of time on streaming platforms. So for them, a film equals a screen, and the screen equals mostly time spent at home. Which is also why a lot of these children, they mostly watch movies with their families. Only very, very few of the children in the research talk about how they watch films with friends. It's a very family-based experience for them. So this Montenegrin boy is saying, well, I mostly watch movies with my dad and at home. And the same holds true for Wales.
Who do you watch films with?
My family.
My mum, my dad, my brother, my sister, my dog sometimes.
So watching films at home, which is really, really nice. But that also speaks into how they see, for instance, they see film as something very social, but series is something that they often watch alone. So there is this huge social potential, also the conversation that follows a film experience much more than a series experience, for instance. Then we can see that when they talk about going to the cinema, it's a really memorable experience for these children. So that it doesn't matter if they went last weekend, last Christmas, last month, sometime in 2023. The answers varies a lot. I would say that the children participating, some of them are very active cinema goers. Some of them went to the cinema one time within the last 2 years. But across all, they find it really easy to remember when was the last time I went to the cinema. So there's something very extraordinary about the cinema experience and moving into that room.
Wenn ich einen guten Film in der Schule geschaut habe und es den auch gibt im Kino, dann laden wir jemanden anderen ein, den ihn schauen, und dann, wenn er cool ist, schauen wir ihn ein paar Mal.
Several times. So there's also something about really highlighting the film experience once it moves into the cinema room, because it makes it a little bit more special, and they really recognize this. Then we can see that the cinema experience, however, it's about almost everything but the film. So, of course, the boy from Switzerland, he was very driven on that specific title. But otherwise, when you talk to children in this age group, the cinema experience, it has a lot to do with the seats, the sound, and everything but the film.
Ich gucke sehr gerne Filme mit Mama im Kino, weil es da Popcorn gibt oder Süßes und es ist da halt so bequem auf den Sesseln, das finde ich cool.
And primarily it's about the snacks and the sweets. Maybe you already guessed that, but that holds true across all the countries, I would say. The most important thing really remains to be the snacks and the sweets that accompany the cinema experience and makes it.
Having all the sweets and popcorn.
Met pipocas.
Pipocas?
Ver os filmes. Mais nada.
Also natürlich wichtig ist natürlich schon Popcorn. Schon der Geruch vom Popcorn, wenn man reinkommt, ist so, das ist einfach.
Getting sweets and popcorn.
Eating popcorn.
So they agree here. There is also, again, it speaks into the whole idea of this extraordinary experience where maybe you get some snacks that you don't get when you are watching a film at home, and that just makes it a little extra special. Then we can see that there is a big desire to learn in this young audience group. Learning not necessarily meant as take me to school and I will learn a lot of things, but let me take in the insights that I feel is appropriate for me, because there's not a desire to be taught. We can see that when they talk about why they want to watch films and series, entertainment always comes before learning. I love this quote, so why do watch films and series? Well, I just want to feel happy. I think that says a lot about the state of mind that they are in, these children. They also just want to take in some happy stories or some light entertainment or something that makes them feel good. And that is what primarily drives their interest. That's also primarily why a lot of these children, they talk about the primary pick in films would be something that makes them laugh, something that's funny to me. But then we can see that there is this strong desire to learn, but to choose your own learnings is something that they really highlight a lot. And it is actually really possible to learn a lot of valuable lessons from Harry Potter or from Spider-Man or even from Bluey. Because this is also what they're looking for in the different character developments. They look for things that I can learn. Here's a boy from Greece explaining.
Ποια είναι η αγαπημένη σου σειρά ή ταινία?
Η αγαπημένη μου σειρά είναι οι φεβεροπνητές, γιατί έχει πολλή δράση και λύνει μυστήρια. Πλέον όταν εξασκείται και το μυαλό σου και γίνεται καλύτερο, και τα παιδιά που λύνουν τα μυστήρια είναι στην ηλικία μου, οπότε.
So solving mysteries, or looking at someone solving mysteries, can also train your mind to become better. And I think that's a really cool way of understanding what to learn. Then there's also this idea of these kids, they really like to explore and discover on their own, meaning that subtle messages are much more appreciating than the forced one. So for instance, telling a child, we're going to watch a film that is about someone being bullied. maybe that's not so attractive for them. But if you let them explore on their own and you let them explore what are the emotions that I'm feeling when I'm following this character or watching this story, and then they realize, wow, it's about someone being bullied. There you have it. But the idea that they have autonomy in taking out their own valuable learnings is really important.
Für mich ist ein guter, idealer Film ein Film, wo Action drin hat, aber jetzt nicht zu Film, wo eigentlich nur, keine Ahnung, eine Verfolgungsjagd nach der anderen ist, statt dem ganzen Film. Für mich braucht der Film auch Geschichte.
Yeah, so here's the most beautiful pet rat that we had in the research as well. But if there is a story, then let me explore on my own, and then I can decide which of the elements in the story that I would like to learn something from. That is pretty much what goes across these children. Then we can see as insight number 9, or the key finding, that new platforms become gateways to new curiosities. And we can see that, of course, the young audience, they navigate a borderless world of content streams. That's also how they feel it themselves, because they can log on to all types of screens, all hours of the day, and they can watch whatever they want to watch. So for them, it's a borderless world of entertainment, really. And they also feel super enabled to then dive into them, to these new worlds of formats and content streams that they can go through. That's also why we have this boy from Germany explaining, well, how does he actually watch things?
Also, was guckst du, wenn du alleine schaust?
Alleine schaue ich auf YouTube Shorts.
Und wenn du mit deinen Geschwistern was schaust?
Dann schaue ich eher mit meinem Bruder auf bei so einem Minecraft-YouTube-Videos oder auch YouTube-Shorts oder mit meinen Geschwistern.
Und wenn du mal mit deiner Familie was schaust?
Dann schaue ich eher solche Filme wie Harry Potter, Star Wars oder Flut der Karibik.
So as you can see, there is something for all types of situation as well. So there's something that I watch when I'm alone, there's something that I like to watch when I'm with my siblings, and then there's what we watch as a family. But no matter what, there's something to watch all the time. There are also, we can see that there are new ways of engaging with both the formats, but also with peers and the way that they navigate these new platforms. And they are really enabled to take part in interest-based communities as well. So for instance, when a lot of them talk about watching stuff on YouTube or YouTube Shorts, it also means that it's something that is based on their interest already. Here they get a chance to read comments, they can give a comment, they can give a like, someone can like their comment back, and that gives them a feeling of them being a little bit of a co-creator themselves, but also being part as a community that has a shared interest of things. But it also affects the way that they decide what they want to watch, because of course, navigating all these different platforms also means that they know what they're looking for and they're really quick at judging. So for instance, we have this girl from the Netherlands saying, well, we look at the review and then we see if it's fun. Does it look fun? That's often something that they look on the thumbnail. Does it look fun? And if it does look fun, but also not so fun, okay, so here we're doubting a little bit, then maybe we can watch the trailer sometimes. So they have all of these different strategies for how to select what they want to watch. And they're not giving it a lot of time. So meaning that if the poster doesn't look fun, it's out. Then they're just moving on to the next one. If it looks a little fun, okay, then we can give it a chance. And then there is this whole idea of a potential untapped in these new formats and platforms, because, I mean, no matter how we put it, the kids are there. A lot of them talk about YouTube as one of the main places that they feel like they're watching content. Some of the older ones in the group talk a lot about TikTok. That doesn't hold true for the youngest part of the group. But I mean, in a few years, if TikTok is allowed to stay in Europe, then it's definitely gonna be something similar where they encounter new inspirations, new reference, etc. So there is something about the things they watch on YouTube. It's rarely films, but they watch a lot in there as well.
Do you watch things on YouTube? Yes, sometimes. Yes, of course. YouTube short.
Random panda shorts.
Roblox makeup videos.
I just watch random shorts. I also watch shorts or just Harry Potter videos.
I watch shorts and just like search up sound videos.
So a lot of shorts, and this is of course all children coming from Wales, but it's the same that holds true for the other countries. YouTube is a huge player, but they never talk about watching films. And that just made us reflect a little bit in the research. Why are films not on YouTube? If that is somehow their primary go-to platform, how can films not really be there, or at least get their attention there to then go watch a film elsewhere? And then the last one, and I hope I'm on time. Moving forward, we do see more similarities than differences. So one of the things that we set out to explore was also, how are children, if you look at 12 different countries, how are children acting the same? What are shared similarities? What are differences? What should we be aware of? And something we can see is that it's a global generation with some shared tendencies. So across the different countries, across the different participants, they all tap into some of the same habits, but also desires and what gets their attention. And of course, maybe some of this is not super surprising, because after all, they are just kids and kids like to have fun. But I think it's really interesting to see that a boy from Germany is thinking the same as a boy from Greece. Maybe there are some new universal networks and communities that they are members of without even knowing it, because this is the global community that they're being born into. But across all these countries, we can see that it has to be exciting, of course. Funny, also important with the humor. And then adventure, 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 adventure. It can be scary, but not too scary, because if it becomes too scary, then it's not a film for children anymore. But it has to be a little scary, otherwise it's too childish, and then it's not for me. So again, this mix of going in between the different elements as well. I love The Boy from Greece. Well, a good movie for me is one that has action, a little anxiety, a little fear, and funny and smart characters. That's like the recipe for a good film for him. But it's so interesting to see they all talk about the balances, that the moment it gets too much of anxiety or too much fear, then they're a little hesitant, and then they really don't want to watch it, because they still do have an understanding that there are some films made today that are not meant for them. But they do like to be challenged a little bit to get them a feeling of them also being able to take in more complex narratives. One thing we do see, however, is that the age differences in this group is much bigger than the national differences looking across the different countries. So we can see that looking at a target group called 7 to 11, even though you think it's only 5 years, it's actually multiple subgroups within that overall age gap. And they talk about it. For instance, this girl from Estonia.
Pigem nagu tegelased peaksid olema nooremad, nagu lapsed, umbes minu vanused, 10, 11, 12 vanused. Ja see võiks olla põnev ja mõned kohad võiksid olla hirmsad, aga mitte nagu väga. Ja seal võiks olla nagu fantaasiat palju.
So again, it's something that comes back across the different countries, that they all want to look up. Meaning that an 11-year-old girl from Estonia is not really interested in watching something about an 8-year-old girl, not even a 9-year-old girl, maybe 10. Maybe 10, that's the best, but otherwise preferably going up. And that holds true across. Of course, they can watch content that is about younger characters, but then it's most often seen as a co-watching experience within the family. Maybe there are younger siblings that are driving the selection process here for what we're watching, because if it's up to them, they really like to look up. All the time. And then we've also dived a little bit into this whole idea of what is local and what is international for this age group, because they are all talking about the global players. They're talking about having a subscription to either HBO or to Netflix, or they are on YouTube. And then we also have this idea of dubbing, which takes place in some of the countries that we've been doing research in. And we can see that there is this blurred idea of what is local film. They're not really sure. Of course they know the international ones, because those are the Marvel ones, so they're kind of in a league of their own, but otherwise everything in between, it gets a little blurry for them.
Fällt dir auch ein deutscher Film ein, den du besonders gerne magst?
Oh, ich kenne nicht so viele deutsche Filme, weil ich weiß halt nie, ob die jetzt aus Deutschland sind oder aus Amerika oder so. Weil ich gucke die halt meistens eher auf Deutsch.
So I mean, it's very difficult to know if a film is in a certain language or from a certain country. And that is also something that we can see, especially with animation. We saw the same in the research we did for the Danish Film Institute, where we could see that the youngest part of the group, 7 to 9, they would say, well, I mean, even Disney was a Danish film because it was in Danish. And then moving up until the 15 to 18-year-olds, they would say, no, a Danish film is where they have like these very specific elements that only Danish film can provide. So having this idea of what is the, you can call it the local cinema culture in a specific country. But that is something that grows with age, and it's not something that we have seen in this very young audience group that we've been diving into. That's what I brought for you today.
And we're all looking forward to the full report later this autumn. But maybe you have questions now. You have the chance to think about what Rikke just told you, and are there things you would like to know? Please let us know.
You're talking about the similarities, but what are also differences between the children?
There were little differences, but mostly looking into the idea of adventure. We could see that in the Western countries and the Northern Scandinavian countries, the kids talk about adventure as something that is an escapism from reality. So it has to have a little more extra flavor, where moving more east and down south, it becomes a magical realism. And I thought that was one of the primary differences that we saw, that the idea of having the elevated reality, that's the same, but then the ways that this elevated reality unfolds was different. Yeah.
I was wondering if you, when you analyzed the data, if you took into account. Thank you. When you analyzed the data, did you take into account factors like genders, migration background, international backgrounds from the children?
For this research, that was not one of the primary focus areas, also because it's not something that we asked. It's a very delicate question that you actually can't ask when you do research with children in the way that we do. So you can't profile the participants in that way. And since the research was primarily focusing on the experience of films, we kept it to just letting them speak about their experience of film without having all more socio-demographic factors.
First of all, thank you for your big work. It's very meaningful. Did you maybe add to it also watching quality children's film and measuring the impact on them?
It's not something that we have explored for this one, but I think it's something that's really always interesting. The thing is, measuring impact is always a very fluffy thing to explore with these kids, because often they don't really know how to put into words what is the impact. I think when we talk to the children, and if you hear what they're saying, there actually is a lot of very measurable impact elements when they talk about if they have been inspired or touched, or it made them think about something happening in the world. But if you put that more into a qualitative research of impact itself, it's always hard for them to actually put into words what it is. But I think it's about seeing that they do watch films, they also watch series and YouTubes, and they love watching it. And what they are really saying is, give me more. And I think that's the positive outcome of this research, that they're so curious to learn more, to see more. They're also curious to see content that is not necessarily in their own language, meaning that the borders are completely opened up. And if we see that there are some similar patterns in the western part of the country that are shared with the eastern part, why are films then not being able to travel better? We can see that in Denmark, for instance, a lot of the young teenagers right now are watching things coming out of Thailand or Korea because they encountered it on TikTok. But something like that would never have been distributed in a Danish context by someone else than TikTok. So it's also about understanding how do we get their attention and how can things then travel across. I don't know if that answered your question really, but...
Hi, it's just a question to clarify something which I'm not sure I got right. So you were talking about engagement with different types of content on different platforms, and at some point, I'm not sure if I understood you correctly, if you said that the interaction, for example, with TikTok was rather limited and YouTube was the main platform. But then the kids refer to shorts on YouTube, which is the equivalent of TikTok in terms of attention span and most crucially recommendation of content. So could you just clarify maybe the engagement of with shorter content and platforms that do automatically recommend new content? Because you were talking also about them being very picky. But if you're looking at a lot of YouTube Shorts or TikTok, then the content is pushed on you and not the reverse. So could you just clarify maybe these little differences?
So the reason I mentioned the thing about TikTok is because none of the kids have, interestingly enough, mentioned TikTok as a platform. So, but they all watch YouTube, and on YouTube they watch Shorts, and of course Shorts is coming out of the recommendation media idea. The difference is that they have an idea that when they are in that universe of the recommendation media, they already feel that everything is curated after their taste. But when they watch content on the other platforms, for instance, if they have to choose a film on Netflix, then they get picky because there they have to select themselves on a joint family account, meaning that not everything is built after their taste.
Just a quick follow-up then, it's very short. So, because actually the recommendation algorithm for shorts on TikTok does push content that is not from the content you've watched before intentionally. Is that something that they can sense? Yeah, they don't sense it, so this is... Okay.
Yeah, and I think that speaks into the idea that they are actually curious, but they just don't always know that they're curious, because the difference is how is it being pushed to them. So do I think that something comes because I've watched something similar? Then I'm already in, because then it knows my taste. But if I'm over here and I have to select myself, then I look at the thumbnail, the review, etc., and then I get picky. But it's a really interesting observation.
Hi, as we are on the European Children Films Forum, I was wondering if these 374 children have at all watched one European children movie. Because I had the impression that all the movies they were talking about are mainly from America, Britain, or maybe Asia, as you said. But I don't have the feeling that they are watching local movies at all.
They are.
Yeah. And they do talk about it in all the different countries. Some mentioning have been there. But it is also the correct observation that they tap into a global stream of content. And a lot of the films that they mentioned, for instance, having watched at the cinema, are most often the big American titles. But when they do talk about things they watch as a family, for instance, there's a girl from Italy talking about how she watches Italian classic movies with her family at home because that's what they enjoy doing together. We also have a lot of the German children talking about German titles, etc. So they do watch European films.
So thank you, Rikke.
Thank you.